A major vaccine trial gets put on pause. We'll tell you why. Plus, the end of an era for reality television and why you're probably grinding your teeth right now as you listen to this, even if you don't know it. Here's what you need to know. Good Tuesday morning. What day is today? Wednesday. Good Wednesday morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for September 9th, 2020. I am Carlo Versano, and I'm here once again with Baker Machado, my good friend who is filling in for Jill on this shortened week. Baker, what up?
Carlo, I am 100% with you. I have to remind myself every 5 minutes what day it is. So the fact that it is Wednesday, tomorrow, Thursday, we're that much closer to the weekend again.
Well, anytime it's a shortened week, it messes you up,
it
right?
messes
your head
everything up. I'm writing things wrong in emails. I don't know what day it is. Everybody thinks it's still Tuesday. So yeah, it's just, the worst is going to be here in a few weeks when it's daylight savings time. That's really going to mess everybody up.
I feel like there should be a campaign to just not do daylight savings time this year.
100%. Carlo,
I mean, we should stop doing it anyway, but like this year, nobody needs to do the whole hour earlier of darkness,
So
right?
Carlo,
we're all hanging by a thread here.
100%. You kidding me? So much has happened in 2020. The last thing I need is to change my clock by another hour right now. Listen, I've thought for a while, if I ever have a career in politics, my number one platform, forget the economy, I'm doing my whole platform on daylight savings time. We have got to get rid of this thing.
Honestly, you'd probably win.
Yes. I have an electoral college landslide based on that one thing that I'm worried about. So, Carlo, we got a lot of stuff we got to get to, so let's start off with the big developments in the race for a COVID-19 vaccine. Some big news yesterday. Astrazeneca has now paused their phase 3 clinical trials of their vaccine candidate. This after a patient experienced adverse side effects, a development that public health officials say should be expected, however, in these large trials. Now, the CEO of AstraZeneca was one of 9 pharma chief executives who signed an open letter pledging that they're not going to cut any corners on a potential vaccine, even if they face pressure from the government. Even Dr. Fauci, Carlo, has reiterated that it is unlikely that a vaccine would be ready by the election, even though the CDC is already sort of prepping states saying, listen, there's potential. November 1st, you might get some sort of guidance about a vaccine. But we do have to also say polls continue to show, Carlo, even if a vaccine is ready and available, less than 50% of Americans say they would even take that vaccine.
Well, that's why I think it's really fascinating. First of all, the idea of pharmaceutical executives coming together and saying to the government to tell the government to sort of slow down and let them do their jobs. Yeah, that does not happen normally, right? That just shows you how, there's a lot of worry about, there's so much distrust in institutions and particularly in the federal government that they really felt like they had to come out and say, look, we're doing our work. Let us do our jobs here. Sort of like a bizarro world thing. But look, the thing with AstraZeneca stopping this trial, it's good in some ways, right? It means that they're being cautious. It means that they're doing what they're supposed to do. This is why you have clinical trials, right? Any large trial, when you're talking about thousands and tens of thousands of people who are subjects in that trial, people are going to have some adverse side effects. It's going to happen. We don't even know if what happened in this one was because of the vaccine or because this person got sick in another way or got sick with something else. We just don't know. So this is why you have these trials. This is why you stop down when you have an adverse reaction. You isolate the sick patients, see what happens. So I don't think anybody should freak out. It's not really that big of a deal. It should be expected. One of the things is the media, us included, we're not used to covering this kind of like, we don't
race
usually
to a vaccine.
Yeah, like this is something that like the medical press knows how to cover.
Yeah.
But we're not used to it, right? So I think people just need to just be very cautious in how they're getting their information on this stuff, because everybody's paying very close attention for good reason. But I think it didn't bother me that this happened.
No, Carlo, I actually feel more assured that this is happening. Could you imagine if there were no pauses in the clinical stages whatsoever, and it just blows through all the phases and they're like, all right, here's your vaccine, it's ready to go. I think a lot of people would be even more skeptical, I think, than they are now. And look what's happening in Russia, by the way. They're blowing past all their clinical stages right now in Russia, which adds even more skepticism that Russia even has has a vaccine right now because they're doing it in such small sample sizes. So I actually think this is more reassuring because it allows big companies to sort of recalibrate and figure out what's happening, because clearly a wide swath of people are not going to be exactly the same in terms of how they respond to a vaccine.
Sure.
All right, let's stick with the election coming up here in a little bit. Joe Biden is going to be in Michigan on Wednesday, Carlo. He's going to announce a new policy intent
Today, right?
Yes, today, Wednesday. I don't know what day it is anymore. So Joe Biden's in Michigan today. He's going to talk about the practice of offshoring. Carlo, this is when companies base themselves in low-tax countries like Ireland. Now, Biden has been making inroads against President Trump when it comes to the economy, the only area that Trump still outpolls him. But Carlo, we have to say, like a lot of polls, that number is contracting a lot as well. President Trump early on in the year maybe had a 10-point lead or so on Joe Biden when it came to issues of the economy. That was really his only thing that voters trusted him on. But that number has gotten significantly smaller. And if you actually look in particular states, Joe Biden actually leads President Trump when it comes to the economy in certain swing states as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the question of who would do a better job handling the economy is probably the most important question in any poll in any year, but it's especially true in any year where, there's a recession or there's a big economic downturn like this year. So it is potentially very important for Biden if he's able to cut into Trump's lead there, and it looks like he is. A couple polls here that I pulled last night. CNN last week had Trump leading 49-48 on the economy. In May, it was 54-42 Trump. That's a big change there. Quinnipiac last week, Trump and Biden tied at 48. Trump led by 5 in June. CBS has Trump up 1 on the question of the economy. These are all national polls, so take them with a grain of salt. But to your point, Baker, this is a little bit of a tightening.
But by the way, I would add, we talk to traders, to analysts all the time about this. How would the market respond to a potential Joe Biden presidency? In many instances, the market sort of pricing in a potential Joe Biden win. A lot of the Fortune 500 CFOs are expecting Joe Biden to win. And some of those analysts actually say, Carlo, they might actually prefer a Joe Biden presidency, only in the sense that the President Trump by tweet can dictate where the market is going. He could tweet something out and then all of a sudden the Dow is shifting 200, 300 points in either direction. Joe Biden, you're not sort of getting that. The market's adverse to as much sort of volatility as they possibly can get. And with Joe Biden, at least they feel like they're getting something steady, even though on a policy front, they might agree with President Trump more than they would Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, let's. By the way, this also just crossing the wires earlier this morning. President Trump apparently nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize earlier this morning as well, Carlo.
Yeah, this is just breaking now. This bulletin coming in from Norway. President Trump has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to broker peace between Israel and the UAE. This is something we covered on the podcast a week or two ago when this happened. Remember, it's not hard to be nominated. For anybody can nominate.
Anybody can submit you. I've submitted you 3 years in a row, and so far nothing's happened.
And still nothing. But yeah, it's nevertheless big news. And the Nobel Prize is handed out before the elections in October. So this could, I guess, potentially be an October surprise. Look, Baker, one thing that I wanted to mention while we're on the topic of the president, just because it's so out of the ordinary. This is one of those stories that, again, I'm such a broken record here, but in a normal world that we do not live in anymore, this would be like the biggest story of the week. It would be a huge scandal. This will be forgotten by tomorrow. But the Department of Justice moving to take over the president's defense in a defamation trial brought on by a woman who says President Trump raped her back in the 90s. Excuse me, I can't speak this morning. The Justice Department says that because Trump was acting in his official capacity as president when he denied knowing this woman, he is entitled to a government-funded defense. That is extremely unusual. This would be, again, a huge scandal in any other time. But I think every American should know that their tax dollars are going to defend President Trump against accusations of rape from before he was president. this is just another example of the politicization of the Department of Justice, which is now essentially acting as the personal lawyer of the president of the United States.
Yeah, that's what E. Jean Carroll, who is accusing President Trump of these allegations, essentially said in her statement yesterday, Carlo, that Americans should be mortified. And this chilling effect as to what you said, that the Department of Justice is representing the president of the United States in a claim that happened before President Trump was even the president of the United States whatsoever. There seems to be some immunity reasons as to why it seems like President Trump is asking the Department of Justice to represent him. I think a lot of legal experts are saying that this basically would mean President Trump would be immune from this sort of lawsuit because he is a sitting president, similar to what we saw with the situation with his tax returns and others. But still, you're 100% right. The politicization of what we're seeing with the Department of Justice, unprecedented when it comes to what happens in American history.
Yeah, and if the Democrats were smart, this would be in ads all over swing states today. Your tax dollars are going to defend the president in a defamation suit. That's it. That's the whole ad.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say one of these other poll numbers that's happening in Florida that really kind of shook a lot of pollsters yesterday, and me in particular. We had two different polls coming out of Florida yesterday. One was NBC and this Marist poll, and another one was from the Miami Herald yesterday, showing President Trump making big inroads, not only just in Florida, a state that Joe Biden has been leading so far, but also President Trump now leading among Hispanic and Latino voters, something a lot of people thought was unprecedented given the anti-immigration rhetoric that the president has been basically talking about for many, many, many years. And it's really fascinating, Carla, because a lot of Cuban voters are big fans of President Trump based on a lot of these polls. I would have to say what's interesting is Joe Biden is actually doing better with seniors over the age of 65 than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. So if whatever losses he's having with Latino voters, he's making up for with older voters. But this should be a giant red warning sign for Democrats right now in Florida, given the fact that Nevada, which is also one of the most highly Latino populations in the country, also a huge swing state that President Trump thinks he can win as well. That should be another worry for Joe Biden out there.
That Florida poll, I guess I didn't see the big why Democrats were freaking out about yesterday, because don't Cuban Americans in Miami always vote Republican?
Most of them do. Yes, most of them do. And they were a little bit more adverse to President Trump in the early days of his administration.
I guess that's what it is. They're breaking towards him.
But this was one of the main reasons why Joe Biden didn't choose Karen Bass to be his vice presidential running mate, one of the larger ones, because in the past she went to Cuba when she was a young woman, and she also had praised Fidel Castro at one particular point, and that was very toxic for Joe Biden because he knew, especially in Miami-Dade County, that that's not going to sit well. What's interesting is Hillary Clinton won Miami-Dade County by 30 points in 2016. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden is winning Miami-Dade County by 17 points in 2016. Just goes to show that Miami is going to be or Florida in particular is going to be a very tough state at the end of the day in November.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's talk about the extreme weather, Carlo, caused by climate change that we're seeing in the western part of the U.S. More than 85 wildfires are burning across the West Coast from Washington State to Southern California. The massive Creek Fire in Central California is now burning an area the size of Central Park every 30 minutes and is 0% contained at this particular moment. The flames from that blaze have turned the skies over Yosemite about 60 miles away into an eerie orange color. Our producer for Wake Up with Cheddar, Rebecca, also was posting photos in Washington of a lot of the fires that she's seeing. And it looked like a scene out of Lord of the Rings that we've been seeing on the West Coast. It's so ominous and terrifying.
Yeah, these pictures out of Yosemite are particularly sort of like apocalyptic looking. I'll link to those in the newsletter if you want to take a look. Meanwhile, Baker, talking about weather, 3 days after the Rockies saw triple-digit temperatures. Mm-hmm. That's your hometown, right? Mm-hmm. Denver. There is now a winter weather advisory in place. Denver and Boulder, 6 inches of snow by noon today. That's crazy. Parts of Colorado, Montana, and Utah saw temperatures plummet 70 degrees in 24 hours. They are now experiencing their earliest freeze on record. Remember, something about climate change. One of the worst things that ever happened, I think, in terms of messaging was that the climate change was called global warming, right? Because what it really should be called, and I'm not the first person to say this, is global weirding. Because it's not just that it's not just that climate change is making everything hotter. It's just messing everything up, right? So I think that the early days of messaging on climate change were bad because people are like, oh, well, it's snowing early in Denver. That means that global warming's a hoax. Like, no, it's all part of the same thing. It's just messing everything up, right?
I mean, Colorado weather is so quirky anyway, but we've never had snow this early on in September, especially when I'm like sweating my tuchus off here in New York City, and my family is like sending me photos of my dad having to like basically like brush and shovel the driveway back home. It is incredibly weird what's happening in Colorado, but Colorado also going through a huge fire as well, so the moisture is duly needed right now in my home state.
Yeah, that is a good note. And I did want to mention that also. Actually, there have been fires in Colorado that hopefully will be put out by this snow.
But either way, still incredibly bizarre that in September, anywhere is getting snow at this particular point. I do want to talk and switch gears and talk about the markets now, Carlo. The stocks that have been responsible for the lion's share of the market gains that we've seen over the course of the summer are pretty much now responsible for dragging the entire stock market lower over the last few days. Shares of tech companies like Apple, Facebook, Zoom, that led the NASDAQ down yet again on Tuesday, putting the official index in correction territory just since last Thursday. Tesla, by the way, we've talked about Tesla this entire year and this meteoric rise that Tesla has had, up 400% in some instances until this month. They had their worst day ever yesterday, down 21%. The Dow and the S&P had their worst 3-day stretches that we've seen in months. So it's been a very rocky September for the markets, Carlo.
Yeah, and September is actually usually a pretty bad month for the market, so I don't think it's that unusual. Look, markets go down. I mean, people forget that because they just seem to like go up forever. And I don't want to bring everything back to the election, but look, this is an election year, and everything sort of does. All roads lead to the election, right? But look, going back to 1928, right on the verge of the Great Depression, incumbent presidents have won 90% of elections when the S&P 500 is positive in the previous 3 months. That's according to data from this brokerage firm, BTIG. I wanted to mention that just because, we have all these like predictors for what's going to happen in November, and nobody knows, but that is about as good a predictor of who's going to win as you'll get. A 90% return on for the incumbent when the S&P is positive in the 3 months preceding. So we'll see. We'll see if that holds this year. We obviously have no idea what the markets will do, but it is certainly true that they're taking a breather from this run.
This is why James Carville always famously said, it's the economy, stupid. And this is exactly what President Trump believes is going to help him, because the markets have been on a tear for all of the summer. The problem is, and we have to continue to cite this for people, obviously the market's much different than the rest of the economy. So while a lot of people who have stocks right now might be doing really well, there's still a ton of people who are really hurting out there, Carlo. And we have to remember, only a small percentage of Americans actually have stocks in this country.
Yep.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about something that's very close and near and dear to my heart. Keeping up with the Kardashians, Carlo, next year is going to be the last for this franchise. The Kardashian-Jenner clan announced yesterday that they've decided to end the reality show after 14 years, 20 seasons, and get this, 12 spin-off series. Carlo, I have to say, I having worked at E! in the past, in my previous life, it's crazy to think that that the Kardashians franchise would be over, at least on E! And then, by the way, I want to say it's just Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I still have this weird feeling in my stomach that there will be some other spin-offs. I really feel like Khloe and Kylie probably will maybe have a show on the network. But it's weird to think of E! without the Kardashians attached to it. And in many ways, I actually think this is good for E! because they've been so synonymous with the Kardashians. This allows them to, I don't know, get another reality show.
Yeah, or something, right? I mean, look, I think that first of all, I should preface this by saying that I've never watched the show, but I don't want to. It's very easy to make fun of the Kardashian family, right? And it's sort of been like the nation's pastime for the last 15 years, which is fine. I mean, but you have to give them credit, right? You have to give them credit for the cultural impact they've had. The entire 100%. Influencer culture that exists in this country would not have existed without Kim Kardashian and the rest of them.
Carlo, even more. Carlo,
right?
even more than that. This family. I mean, yes, we know of the family from the OJ days, based on Robert Kardashian, the father representing OJ. But really, in terms of popular culture, this family took off based off of a sex tape. And look at where they are now, what they've been able to build from that, to the point that now Kim Kardashian is now helping people get freed from jail. Her husband is trying to run for president at this particular point. One of the daughters is a self-described billionaire by Forbes magazine. So much has happened with this family, and this all started from a videotape. And by the way, don't forget, at one point, Kim Kardashian was Paris Hilton's personal assistant. Never forget about that.
I actually didn't know that. Yeah, look, I mean, she gets knocked a lot, but I've always said, like, good for her. I mean, if you're able to sort of like parlay something like that into a legitimate career,
100%.
that's sort of the American dream. Also, by the way, mark my words, Netflix will sign this family to something in the next couple months. Like, they're not going anywhere.
No.
It's not like this is the end of the Kardashians.
Kris Jenner is one of the smartest people in all of Hollywood. She knows 100% of exactly what she's doing in terms of navigating the family through everything. She's basically, I mean, she's the greatest momager, but greatest manager you'll probably ever find on the planet. So I'm 100% in agreement with you. Just because this show, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, might be ending, this is not going to be the end of this family whatsoever. Nope. All right, finally, I definitely want to take a pause about this next story and focus, obviously, Carlo, on our mouths right now. We're going to do a little exercise. Are your top and bottom teeth, Carlo, are they touching right now? I'm curious.
They are.
Okay.
A little bit. Yeah.
I asked this for a reason, because your teeth are never supposed to touch unless you're eating or chewing. And the reason for that is, in a viral essay in the New York Times, a New York dentist writes about an epidemic of tooth fractures from excessive grinding that dental professionals are now seeing, in large part due to the stress that we're all going under in 2020, but also the poor ergonomics of working from home and the sleep deficit many of us are carrying. And this article in the New York Times, I have to say, really hit home for me, because last week I went to the dentist for the very first time this year.
Wow.
My 6-month checkup 8 months later. And my dentist said the same exact thing to me. She was like, you're clearly not wearing a night guard. Everybody's getting cavities right now, which is great for the dentist because they're making all the money back that they lost from the pandemic. But she's like, you would be incredibly surprised how many people are grinding their teeth ad nauseum right now, and that's not even in their sleep.
Yeah, so this article, which again I'll link to in the newsletter if you haven't read it, it's basically this dentist talks about how this really hit home for me, because she's talking about how when you're at work, you're sort of like when you work sort of like at a desk job, right? You're sitting at your desk, you've got your monitor at eyesight, like you're pretty good usually about like how you've sort of learned the ergonomics of like how you're supposed to sit and be at a computer for hours a day. I don't know about anybody else, but when I'm home, I'm all over the place. Like I spend some time in bed. I spend hours on the couch.
Always all over the map.
All spread out, right? My wife takes, we basically have like one little seating area that my wife is taking over all day, which is fine because I like to sort of move around. But the problem with that is that you're slumped and your spine gets all out of whack. And so this is what she's saying is the problem, that's sort of like leading to all these jaw issues and the tooth grinding. But I didn't realize that your teeth actually aren't supposed to ever touch.
I know, which is so weird.
Unless they're in the process of eating. So just another thing you got to worry about, Big.
100%. By the way, I do have to say the good news, though. I got out of my dentist appointment for the first time in 35 years. My dentist said, I can tell you're flossing. That is something I've never heard in my entire life of ever going to the dentist.
I know, right? I think, it's always okay, have you been flossing? It's like, well, I did for a couple of days and then I just stopped.
The last time I think I flossed, I think you did it. So, yeah.
I got to say, though, I've never thought I'd say this, but a dentist appointment right now feels like a total luxury.
Oh,
I love it.
Carlo, I felt like I lost 30 pounds when I left the dentist office. It was one of the most invigorating experiences ever, mainly because I want a massage so bad. I feel like the pandemic has taken away just getting a massage from me. So just even I felt like I was getting pampered at the dentist office, even though they're literally just drilling into my mouth, but it felt amazing.
That's something. Yeah, that's even in 2020, a dentist drill is something we can ask for. Okay, folks, we've taken up enough of your time this morning. That is what you need to know for this Wednesday, September 9th. We'll see you guys mañana.